Okay, good morning. In terms of when to take the exam, some of you are saying that, you're planning to take it this semester, some next, some aren't quite sure when. My advice is do not wait. The longer you wait to take the exam, the harder it is. It's a general exam. It really is designed that you should be able to take it and do well if you're taking it in your last semester. When you've completed most of the 400 level courses in either the civil program or the environmental program, you have what you need to take the exam. It's also a great thing to put on your resume to actually be able to say that you have passed the FE exam. It's important in terms of your ability to progress in the profession. You really do, if you're going to practice as a civil or environmental engineer, you want to be a licensed professional engineer, at least if you want to progress into program managing, project management, overseeing projects. You need that PE exam. And then the other thing is, if you don't pass it the first time, you have time to retake it. So it's a good reason to really make sure, to think about taking it in the final year of your program. If you're thinking of going on to graduate school, maybe you're thinking, okay, well, I'm going to go into graduate school and I won't need it. My advice is still take it. I'd say about 80% of students that go on for the master's program go out into consulting when they're done with the master's program, and typically you're going to want the PE there. That other 20% go on maybe for PhD, but actually most of the graduates of our PhD program actually go on to consulting. So you end up back in consulting. And if you have a PhD and you're consulting, they're going to want you in project management because of your billable hours. Okay, you're too expensive to send out in the field to collect samples. So they're going to want you to have a PE. And the way to do that is to take the FE. So it's a 6-hour exam. It is computerized. Basically, I've documented the breakdown. So there's a non-disclosure agreement. You agree not to disclose what's on the exam, a little tutorial, and then the exam itself is actually 5 hours and 20 minutes with a 25-minute break. Talk more about the questions, but there's 110 questions, and this is true for both environmental, civil, it's true for chemical also. There's no penalty for wrong answers, so if you're not sure, yes. And all choices are equally represented, so there's no, it's like, if you don't know, don't assume. If you don't know the answer, answer C or whatever. It also uses both SI and US units, so you need to be fluent in both. Now, the civil exam is recently changed, and these changes are effective now. So if you're taking the exam anytime in the future, or the foreseeable future, this is the breakdown of the material. And the pie chart is based on the average. Typically, if you look at the breakdown, it's like 10 to 14 questions. So I just took the average. So you can see we've got math and statistics, ethics and professional practice, econ, that is traditional engineering type econ, statics, dynamics, mechanics of materials. Those are courses you took early on. CE materials, so that really aligns with CE 337, Fluid mechanics lines with 321. Water resources, and notice they actually combined water resources and environmental engineering. So there used to be a separate section. They took hydraulics, hydrology, water resources, and environmental engineering and combined that. So there really isn't a lot from 421, 422, and basically 483. Structural engineering, in the most recent version of the exam, they combined structural analysis and structural design. Those used to be two different sections. They're now one section called structural engineering. Then geotech, transportation, construction, and surveying. So if you kind of think about this in terms of lower level courses, surveying's a 200 level course. Sorry. Math and statistics, again, lower level courses. Engineering econ covered in 371. Statics, 221. Dynamics, as a 300 level course. Mechanics and material, 200 level course. At least half of this is material that you're going to cover in 200 or 300 level courses. Okay, so there really is only about half of it that you cover in 400 level courses. The environmental engineering exam also changed. The major change in the environmental engineering exam was the addition of a section on energy and the environment. Very little else changed, but again, you see thermo, okay, lines with ME 201, health hazards and risk assessment, that's covered. We really don't cover it beyond 280. Fluid mechanics and hydraulics, now you're looking at 321 and 422. Groundwater, soil, sediment, surface water hydrology. It's actually a big, fairly large component from 421. Air pollution and control, 489. Solid and hazardous waste, we really don't cover to any great extent. Some of that is in 280. Environmental chemistry, 481. Water and wastewater, this course. Fundamental principles, so population predictions we cover here. Reactor theory we cover here. Material science we cover a little bit here. There isn't, and then the big, like I said, the big change is this section on energy and the environment. We'll talk a little bit more about that. So when can you take the exam? There are 4 time periods in, or 4 windows. And so if you take it now between October and December and you don't pass it, you have to wait until January, or the January to March window in order to retake it. And you can't take it more than 3 times in a 12-month period. I don't know of anybody that needed 3 times to pass the exam, sometimes twice, but I can't think of anyone that actually needed to take it 3 times, not that I know of. Nobody at least admitted to it. So what happens? You register, you schedule your appointment. You'll do that through your My NCEES. That is the organization that administers these exams. They're actually, I see that they're administered, I guess, by Pearson, but everything is set up and all the payment is through the NCEES, National Council on Engineering Exams, and I forget what the S stands for. During the registration process, you'll select your exam location, and then you'll be presented with a list of available dates for your appointment. And you can also look at other locations. The exam costs $175. which is one of the reasons why you want to make sure you do study and hopefully can pass it the first time. On the My NCEES website, when you register, you'll put in your contact information, you'll put in your education. The Michigan board does not require you to submit an application or any additional fee. Some states do. This is a national exam, so once you pass it, it doesn't matter whether you pass it in Michigan or you pass it in some other state other than California, you have passed the exam. Now, other states may have other requirements for becoming a professional exam, but you have passed, in terms of the FE, you've passed that exam. In terms of locations in the area, there are 4 locations in East Lansing, Ann Arbor, Grand Rapids, and Southfield, Michigan. There's actually 2 in Grand Rapids. So in terms of preparing, my suggestion is just attend the review sessions. The plan is that we will have review sessions in the spring. There are no review sessions this semester beyond what I am doing right now. However, there is a FE review site on LonCappa that I maintain that has whatever PowerPoints were provided to me by the faculty that gave the review sessions in the spring. Those are on there. Unfortunately, nothing was recorded, but the plan is anything that we do in the spring will be recorded. In addition, I do have links to recorded sessions from other universities. So that information is on there. I also have practice problems that I wrote back years ago for 280 that are on the FE. It doesn't record. They're set up as practice presentations. I was told that ASCE is doing a review session this semester. I haven't heard anything about that. So that's great if they are. I know the plan is to do a review session next semester. The other thing that ultimately, if you're still here next year, we have added a 1-credit pass-fail review course. It's not required in the curriculum, but it will be offered at least once a year with the review sessions, and we're kind of working out the details of how to implement that. My advice is do the practice exams. Become familiar with the reference handbook. That is what you will have. You're not allowed to bring in anything beyond the reference handbook, and it changes from one season to the next. It was just updated. So for instance, for those of you that had me for 489 in the past, where I did use the reference handbook sections on the exams, it's entirely different. It's formatted differently. So you really want to go on the NCEES website, register. You can download the reference handbook for free. And my advice is have that on hand and study with that. If you're not on the LonCappa FE review, then let me know if you would like to be, and I will add you to that. And then I would consider purchasing review books or practice exams. If you look at, if you purchase a book and you're taking the environmental, I would purchase you don't even have to do the latest copy of Introduction to Environmental Engineering by Davis and Cornwell. There are FE type problems at the end of the chapter. There are sections in that book that cover hydrology, that cover sustainability, that cover energy, water and wastewater, air pollution. So it's a good review, and you don't need the latest version. I think it's the 5th edition that was just released. The 4th edition will have what you need in terms of review, and you should be able to pick up the 4th edition pretty cheaply online. So if you're going to do a review book, at least for the environmental, that's actually not a bad book, and it's a lot cheaper than purchasing the actual review book. And in fact, it even covers some thermo because it has energy balances, energy balances.
Sorry, what was the name of that book again?
It's Introduction to Environmental Engineering, and it's by Davis, the same author as your textbook, and Cornwell. In terms of calculators, I will go over the calculators in just a little bit because there are very specifics in what you're allowed to bring in. And I mean specifics, down to what kind of sweater you can wear. So you can find, as I mentioned, you can obtain the reference handbook for free. If you want a print copy, they charge you $14 for the print copy, but you can get you can download it for free. And you just set up your account. You're going to need that anyway when you take the exam. So in terms of the categories for exam questions, the first category are knowledge questions. So these are things that the author of the exam believe you should know as an engineer. This information is not in the reference handbook. And it's the kind of thing you're going to know or you're not going to know. So if you don't know it, move on, or guess and then move on. So for example, you should know that coagulation removes turbidity and color. You should know that lime softening removes hardness. Eutrophication is the result of excess nitrogen and phosphorus. Anaerobic bacteria require the presence of oxygen, and I probably could have come up with some more for the civil, but these are the type of questions that are asked with these knowledge questions. You don't want to go searching through the reference handbook for this kind of information, and even if you did, you're not going to find it. Then there are questions for which the information needed is in the reference handbook. So it's really, really important to know what's in the reference handbook. So for instance, if you're taking the environmental exam, you're going to rely on information in every one of these sections listed. So just knowing what's in the environmental section is insufficient. And the same is true if you're taking the civil exam. You're probably going to need to know something from safety. You're going to need to know something from mathematics, probability and statistics. You may have a chemistry question. Definitely fluid mechanics. You could have something from heat transfer. Definitely from thermo, economics, and then all of the various civil engineering. For the environmental exam, you may very well need the geotech, the hydrology, and the hydraulic sections of that civil portion. So don't just look at either civil engineering or environmental and think you're going to have enough information. And then there are questions for which the information needed is not in the reference handbook, and then that information is provided within the question statement. So in terms of question types, there can be multiple choice, single answer, fill in the blank, multiple correct answers, matching, and then what they call hot area or these are basically point and click on a graph. Remember, it's all computerized, so they can do things like point and click on a graph. For the energy and the environment section, based on what the information that I have been able to gather, the type of questions that you could expect in this section are mass balance type energy questions, similar to what we do in 480 in terms of power plant type questions. Energy sources, so knowing something about conventional and alternative. And I don't have a good sense of how much of this is covered in 371. So some of you who have taken 371 might want to chime in here with how much.
I would say maybe the first two definitely were covered in 371. Number 5, not so much. Yeah, I would agree with number 4. That one was decently covered, and not much on number 3.
So when you so number 3, do you mean thermal, radiation, noise pollution?
Yeah, yeah.
Because I know that we cover in 489, I cover greenhouse gas production. I presume that's covered in 371. Carbon footprint, I would guess. So what I will do now that this is included is chat with the instructors for 371 to see if maybe they can add a little bit in there in terms of some of these other impacts. There is a question on impact on wildlife in the practice exam. So they're thinking about impact on wildlife. And some of this is from the list of topics, but some of it is actually, I went through the practice exam trying to see if I could ascertain what type of questions are asked. So in terms of taking the exam, start with the areas you know best. Just because a problem statement is long doesn't mean it's difficult. So try and avoid confusing long and difficult. Read the entire question. Try and use a lot of the approaches that I try and model in 483 and also in 489. Read the question, write down the information you're provided, write down the missing information. So what are you looking for? If you can, draw a picture, especially if it's a mass balance, draw a picture. Read all the answers before selecting, and then remember that the answers often reflect common mistakes. Common mistake on conversion is thinking there are 1,000 cubic meters per liter instead of 1,000 liters per cubic meter. So typical dividing instead of multiplying. So kind of think through those. And then many questions will often ask for the closest answer. So you may not get the exact answer, but you'll get something close. Don't take in a calculator that you have not used before. I have always advised this on exams. You don't want to be figuring out how to use a calculator in a timed exam. It's just added stress that you don't need. And answer every question. There's no penalty for a wrong answer. So if you're not sure, you still have a 25% chance of getting the answer. So write something down or pick an answer. If you don't know the answer, try and eliminate things that are clearly incorrect. Work backwards from the remainder, and if all else fails, guess. And make sure you're timing yourself so that you don't run out of time. The way the exam is scored, it's typically about 70% is passing, but in evaluating the problems, because they can do a full statistical analysis of all of the answers, and anything that is considered unfair is thrown out. So if there are unfair problems, those are eliminated. There are always beta test questions, and those are not scored. So there are 10 randomly selected questions that are there solely for statistics. You won't know which ones they are. I don't know which ones they are, and I can't even tell you which what type of questions, because I don't know. But I do know that there are 10 randomized questions that are just there for statistics. And then the scores are curved for consistency. And then any question that does count has been thoroughly statistically evaluated. The evaluation is based on real test takers under real test conditions. And there's a question for those of us with RCPD accommodations. Can you request extended time for the exam? Yes, you can. You have to go through the process through, basically, if you go on the NCEES website, it talks about that. You'll go through Pearson, and then you'll provide that the documentation like you document to the university. But yes, you can request extended time. The bottom line is you actually need to answer about 60 to 65% of the 110 questions correctly. That corresponds to about 70% of the 100 questions. If you pass, they don't tell you anything. If you fail, you will get data on what areas you performed well on and which areas you didn't. There's a YouTube video that I included here about scoring the exams. Just started about 6:21 to get the information on scoring. So in terms of pass rates, these are the pass rates, national pass rates. Typically, environmental has been running about 84% or so. Civil typically runs a little bit lower, about 75%, but typically above national average. That's for MSU. I don't know for chemical or mechanical. And this is based on students that took the FE for the first time. They attended an ABET accredited program, and they took the exam within 12 months of graduation. Basically, the way that statistics that we get, if you take the exam within 12 months of graduation, that's considered as the same as if you're taking it while you're a student in terms of statistics. What to bring to the exam? Your appointment confirmation letter. Calissa asked about graphing calculators. You must bring a NCEES approved calculator. I'll show you which ones those are. An acceptable form of ID, and they actually specify what is acceptable, and approved comfort items, and they specify what are approved comfort items. So in terms of identification, you need an ID issued by a government entity in the country where you were testing, or an international travel passport, and they want it in Roman characters from your country of citizenship. And your ID must be current, include an expiration date, your name, date, photo, signature. In terms of approved calculators, these are the approved calculators. So if you don't have an approved calculator, it's listed here. Borrow one. If you can borrow one well before the exam so that you can practice with it, do so that you actually get used to that calculator. The items that you're allowed in the testing room are your ID, your calculator, the key to the test center locker, a reusable booklet and marker that they will supply to you, your eyeglasses, but you can't bring in the case, a light sweater or jacket. If you have any sort of brace, you're allowed to bring that, hearing aids, eye drops, and mobility devices. I told you they specify things you're not allowed to bring in. Cell phones, handheld computers or PDAs, fitness trackers, watches. So if you got a watch, they're going to make you leave it in the locker. Fitness tracker, they're going to make you leave that in the locker. A wallet, purse, backpacks, bags, all those, okay, have to be left in the locker. No hats or head coverings unless they're religious apparel. No books, pens, pencils, erasers. No food, no beverages, no coats, no hoodies, except that light jacket that they're going to allow you to bring in. This is what is on there. I assume that they're strictly enforcing this, but this is the official rules. You're also not allowed any gum chewing or smoking during the exam. So then once you pass the exam, to obtain certification or licensure, you file an application with the engineering licensing board in the state in which you wish to be registered. And there's instructions on your My NCEES site. It varies from state to state. And there are sample application forms. And as I said, those will vary from state to state. They'll want transcripts. And some states will want reference letters. So really it varies, as I mentioned, it varies from state to state.
Can you submit an application for 2 different states? Like at the same time?
I believe so. I don't think there's any reason why you can't. If you can be licensed as a PE in both states, so I can't see why you couldn't be registered in both states.
Okay, thank you.
In Michigan, the statement is applicants must complete all education experience and exam requirements prior to submitting a license application, but that's for the PE. There is no requirement in Michigan for registering as essentially an engineer in training. So once you've passed the FE, you've passed the FE. Now, you can take, in Michigan, you can take the PE exam once you pass the FE. In fact, there was a recent graduate who posted on her Facebook, she set up a study area and she had the dates for the PE exam and the dates for the FE exam. And I and someone else responded like, seriously, you're taking the PE exam before you take the FE exam? Apparently in Michigan, you can do that. There is no requirement in Michigan to have the experience before you take the PE exam. In fact, apparently there's no requirement to take the FE before you take the PE exam as long as you have an ABET accredited degree. You have to pass the FE before you can be licensed. But apparently you can take the exam even before. The exam right now, this time, is still a paper exam, which is the reason why they're being taken in the opposite time frame. But once you pass the FE, my advice is take the FE first. Once you pass the FE, there's no reason not to take the PE. The PE exam is also national. It's recognized in all states except California and I believe New York. New York, you'd have to take an additional exam. California, the same thing, and that's California because of the earthquakes. So they have some additional requirements. But once you pass the PE exam, then you take your 4 years experience requirement, and then you apply for licensure. Okay. So it used to be that you had to get the 4 years experience before you took the PE exam, and that's not true anymore, at least not in Michigan. So my advice, if you're take the PE now, it's all based on coursework. You're not going to be better prepared 4 years from now, but you're going to have to do more studying 4 years from now. So if you can afford it, my advice is take it sooner than later.
I have a question.
Yep. Sorry, what was
So if you take the FE and the PE in Michigan before doing the 4 years, but then you go to a different state where you're supposed to do the 4 years, like if I move somewhere after graduation, would that affect it?
No. No, they're not going to make you take the PE again. You've taken the PE, you've passed the PE, it's a national exam. So,
Okay, thank you.
but they will make you wait. And any state is going to make you wait for that 4 years experience. But once you've passed the exams, you've got your experience requirement, then you can submit the license application. So that's basically what I have.